Hey guys, welcome back to Bite Size Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, hi, my name is Ellie. So this is just a podcast to read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and to give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times. So stick around, it's fun. So if you remember last episode, we read 2 Nephi chapter 18, which is all about seeking the Lord, and, God being with us, and, oh man, it's good stuff. So go back, listen to that if you haven't already. But for this episode, we're going to be reading 2 Nephi chapter 19. So to remind you, we're going to read these chapter summary, and then move on to the verses. So, without further ado, let's read 2 Nephi chapter 19. Isaiah speaks messianically. The people in darkness will see a great light. Unto us a child is born. He will be the Prince of Peace and will reign on David's throne. Compare Isaiah 9. Alright, we already know this is going to be an absolute killer chapter, because we get the unto us a child is born verse. Oh my goodness. And I love it when Isaiah speaks messianically as well, so we're going to get some really good verses. So yeah, I look forward to it. Nevertheless, the dimness shall not be such as was in her vexation, when at first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun, and the land of Naphtali, and afterwards did more grievously afflict by the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan in Galilee of the nations. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined. I love that terminology. They that dwell in the land of shadow, upon them hath the light shined. I love that, because it reminds me that even if you are quote-unquote in the shadow of death, even if you feel like you're somewhere where you cannot escape, God's light can still shine on you. You are never too far away for God's light to reach you. And even if you're in quote-unquote the shadow of death, which sounds pretty severe, sounds pretty like a terrible place to be, God's light can still shine upon you. And it will, in fact, if you look for it. Thou hast multiplied the nation and increased the joy. They joy before thee, according to the joy in harvest, and as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For thou hast broken the yoke of his burden, and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor. For every battle the warrior is with confused noise, and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Potentially the most iconic verse in all of Scripture, because it is just the best one, just objectively the best one. That's not true, there are some really other good ones, but but this is a very, very good chapter, because it gives us titles of Jesus, and all of them have their own poetic meaning, and oh my goodness, I love them all. Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, like wonderful, yes, because he's wonderful, because it is a wonderful miracle that he came unto us and gave us the atonement, and Counselor, because he counsels us through what we're going through, and teaches us to become more like him, counsels us in his ways, you might say. And he is the Mighty God because he is mighty, he's powerful, he can clear away our difficulties if he sees fit. And the Everlasting Father, the everlasting meaning that he is always, and he will always be there for you, and he will always be there for everyone else. And finally, the Prince of Peace, because that is what he wants. He wants peace. He doesn't want conflict. He's not a conflict kind of guy. Of the increase of government and peace there is no end, upon the throne of David, and upon his kingdom to order it, and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. The Lord sent his word unto Jacob, and it hath lighted it upon Israel. And all the people shall know, even Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, that say in the pride and stoutness of heart, The bricks are fallen down, but we will build with hewn stones. The sycamores are cut down, but we will change them into cedars. Therefore the Lord shall set up the adversaries of Rezin against him, and join his enemies together. The Syrians before, and the Philistines behind, and they shall devour Israel with open mouth. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. There again is that motif that Isaiah repeats so often that I love so much. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. And I won't repeat the whole shebang again, because we just went over this like a couple chapters ago, but God will always understand that a lot of what we're doing is bad. I mean, maybe not bad. Good, better, best. Again, like, just not perfect things, And yet, that does not affect his love for us. He is still reaching out with all of his strength and inviting us to come unto him. Even if he's angry with us, and even if he knows that what we're doing is wrong and it must be frustrating on some level for him, he's still there. He's not going to leave us. He's not going to abandon us. His hand is stretched out still. And I love that this is a repeating motif on Isaiah's writings because, oh my goodness, I really just love its meaning. It's so good. And by the way, if you want the chapter where I initially talked about this kind of in more detail, it's 2 Nephi chapter 15. For the people turneth not unto him that smiteth them, neither do they seek the Lord of hosts. Therefore will the Lord cut off from Israel head and tail, branch and rush in one day. The ancient, he is the head, and the prophet that teacheth lies, he is the tail. For the leaders of this people cause them to err, and they that are led of them are destroyed. So here again is the motif that the leaders are a little bit more responsible for the actions of the people that they have jurisdiction over. I've mentioned this a few chapters ago, I can't remember specifically which one, but it talked about how the people who are leading the general people of Israel are a little bit more to blame for the actions of the nation as a whole, just because they're the examples. They have stewardship, they have jurisdiction over these people, and if they're doing bad, then it's more likely that their people are going to be doing bad stuff. And so I once again remind you that if you have some sort of stewardship, whether it just be over a family or over a calling, then I think treat it with care. Therefore the Lord shall have no joy in their young men, neither shall have mercy upon their fatherless and widows. For every one of them is a hypocrite and an evildoer, and every mouth speaketh folly. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burneth as the fire, it shall devour the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forests, and they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened, and the people shall be as the fuel of the fire, no man shall spare his brother. And he shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry, and he shall eat on the left hand, and they shall not be satisfied. They shall eat every man the flesh of his own arm. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh, they together shall be against Judah. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. 3 times in one chapter. 3 times! I told you that this is a repeating motif that pops up throughout Isaiah's writings, and it's so good because Isaiah does a lot of ragging on the people of Jerusalem and talks a lot about how God is kind of disappointed or frustrated or dissatisfied with their actions, and yet he always makes sure to repeat, for all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. Like, he makes it so clear that even though these people in Jerusalem are doing bad stuff, they're hypocrites, they're evildoers, etc., they are still given an olive branch from God. God still, like I mentioned before, relentlessly pursues them. He still desperately wants them to be with him. And that is amazing. I feel like it's so easy to feel like, oh, if we make one mistake, or if we just have one bad habit that we can't drop, then God just is disappointed with us and is fed up with us and just gives up on us. But that is not the case. The people of Jerusalem are doing worse sins than many of us will ever do. And they still get perfect mercy and love from God. They still get his hand reaching out to them. And that never goes away. And I really, really love that. Again, as a repeating motif, it's so good. So the standout verse for this chapter is going to be verse 2, which, to remind you, it says, "The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined." So this is kind of connected to verse 1, which is also kind of the standout verse. They're kind of both standout verses. But what's important about the first verse, it talks about the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, which is actually, according to my research, basically the general geographic locations where Jesus had his ministry. And so when it talks about the people that walked in darkness saw the light, it is talking about the people that didn't have the perfect gospel among them, and then they saw the light in the form of Jesus' ministry in the flesh. And that is so cool how it talks about the specific geographic locations that are going to get the physical, present, bodily light of Jesus Christ in their lives. Like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I've already mentioned how I like the wording of the second half that talks about the shadow of death, and upon them hath the light shined. Because, like, these people were doing wicked stuff. Isaiah just tells you straight up, they're doing wicked stuff. And yet, upon them hath the light shined. And I just think that's great. I think it shows God's unending mercy and willingness to forgive. But yeah, I think that's going to be the episode today. Thank you so much for listening once again. As always, there are those 3 links in the show notes. One is just a web version of the Book of Mormon, and the other 2 are app downloads of the Book of Mormon. All of them are free. So if you don't have your own copy, whether digital or physical, go ahead and click one of those because, oh my gosh, reading along is so enriching. Or just reading straight up. It's just an enriching thing to do. Teaches you a lot about the gospel, teaches you about God himself, and it's really awesome. So yeah, go ahead, click those if you don't have your own. And with that, I'll talk to you later. Bye.